Uh,
What if your body could heal itself? What if you don't have to participate with the pharmaceutical cartels any longer? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have a special guest. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Freedom Lovers Show. We are building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time. I am your host, David James Rodriguez, and our health is very important, as you know. So I'm grateful that we have a wonderful guest today, Craig Lang. He is a natural health healer and founder of Health Alkemy, and he's got a really amazing story and has been helping people for decades to avoid the mainstream medicine because he knows it's toxin and you know it's toxic. And so we're talking about solutions and what can we do as we're trying to build this freer world, this more empowered world where we tap into nature rather than avoiding nature and learn some of the secrets. And he's just a wealth of information. So he's got an awesome story. Before we get into it, Craig, welcome to the show. And if you want to introduce yourself, it's grateful to be with you now.
Thanks, David. I've known you for a number of years now, including, living with you and Bernie in the Dufour house. So, I don't lightly take being interviewed because of the potential to be, the words to be manipulated or misunderstood or misrepresented. So thank you. I really appreciate, just a chance to be a voice for those who don't have a voice. My practice started the day I broke my neck in 1986, in a sense, and I'm 57 now, so I was 21. That's 36 years. That was a process of healing, but the broken neck was the greatest opportunity of my life because the person who broke his neck no longer exists. He couldn't exist in the current time frame. He would have died long ago. The person who broke his neck, he was dysfunctional. And I love that kid, but he was a child. So the story even goes back a little bit further than that. And a lot of us have this story. If you're watching this and you can probably identify or relate or empathize with my story, because I'm a voice for those who don't have a voice, including the plants. I mean, let's be clear. I speak for the plants. And there are very few people that are willing to do that and stand up for the earth and for the plants. But I will give my life for those plants. They're my children. I don't have a family. The earth is my family. And I was doing that as a child. I was talking to invisible angels and ghosts and things that were giving me really good guidance at age 4. My mother found out I was doing it one day and told me to stop because people would think I was crazy if I talked to invisible things. And I didn't really understand, but I wanted to fit into the adult world being 4 years old, I thought they were crazy. I was like, why wouldn't you want to get good guidance? Because I was getting great advice. It wasn't demonic advice. It was good advice. Like, what happens when mom and dad fight like that? And they'd say, oh, they're just do-do-do. And it was very interesting as a 4-year-old to get insights like that. Like, oh, mom and dad just aren't meant to be, and they don't really get along. They're not the same type of person, and it's something personal. And I'm like, 4 years old. Wow, why doesn't everybody use this, And so my invisible friends, as I called them in a journal later, didn't reappear until 35 years later at a silent retreat at Mount Madonna when I was trying to find what enlightenment was. And then after 14 years of sitting in silence a lot, because the path of health is a path of direct experience. If we're a bookworm about our health, we're not in health. So I knew that after I broke my neck. I saw that you got to grab life by the cojones and, carpe diem, seize the day. And in surfing, I've been surfing since age 15. So my path from age 5 to about 15 wasn't good, but I had a good childhood. My mother sheltered me, and I got all the things I needed from the feminine. Like my mother was very nurturing, she cared. My father was a good provider, emotionally absent. Most of the men in my generation have an absent father emotionally because they weren't taught, nothing bad wrong with them. They just weren't educated. So all that leading up to age 15 was when my bubble burst, my little idealistic world. I had become brainwashed. I believed in the United States. I believed in the government. I believed in the civics. And then in a US history class, freshman year of high school, I hear the words manifest destiny. And some part of me went, what the fuck is that? What happened to the natives? They already lived here. What gave them the right to kick them off the land? And it's our manifest destiny. So I started asking questions at age 15, like, what about those natives? And I got ostracized, bullied, picked on, called a freaking rebel, all kinds of name calling. And that's why things are the way they are. That's a CIA operation started long ago to dumb down people so they would pick on people like us who are announcing the holes in the game they've made for us. So that was when I woke up and I shaved my head, became a punk rocker, had a punk rock magazine called Disregarded with my brother and my best friend. We got press passes. We were up in San Francisco in the Broadway district, slam dancing, diving off stages, expressing our anger. There was a great fanzine called The Decline of Western Civilization. That was great fuel, angry music for an angry person. It was like, wow, this is like cool stuff. And the byproduct of those 6 years was my broken neck at age 21. All that anger. So what I learned later when I started learning Chinese medicine is that the word anger is a pointer at suppressed creativity. In a Chinese medical text, The Web That Has No Weaver by Ted Kopchak, one of the lines in that book is that all anger is suppressed creativity. It's suppressed creative energy. So if you get angry when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, and almost kills you, the anger is natural, righteous anger because you're afraid of dying. It's a natural, righteous anger to push away the threat. So we don't want to demonize anger. We want to demonize rage, which is an out of control anger, an unconscious anger, right? But we don't want to demonize righteous anger because look at Braveheart. Braveheart's wife, he was raped, and the English came in and fucked up all of his land. And I back him in slaughtering those British men that did that. You come on my land, you rape my wife, and you take my plants and burn everything down. Yeah, I'm going to stab you a few times. Yeah, just a little bit, It's retribution for your stupidity. So there's a place for that righteous anger is my point. And if we demonize it and we demonize the sacred masculine protector, which is what's being done, then you see the world the way it is in the United States.
Right. They're feminizing the men so that the men, and this big, like the sports arenas, these guys are painting faces, and now it's, football season again. And I played sports growing up, man. I love sports, but then I found out it's the bread and circus so that us strong men are like drawn to it. And we're like, yeah. And why our family or our parents or siblings or friends or children are suffering in this whole global totalitarian state. And so it's so important that you mentioned the fact about anger. And there are points and reasons to be righteously angry. For me, it's the school system, putting these kids in the school system. And like you mentioned, this history lesson, they are literally brainwashing children so that they become slaves in the system. Get your RFID chip and, be a good, happy little serf or peasant forever, and get rid of the middle class. So you have the I don't call them elites. I call them the hyper wealthy predator psychopaths, and then the lower class. They want to get rid of us, average people, and make just super wealthy or super poor. And so I think it's really empowering when we learn that we are able to heal ourselves naturally, and with using herbs and minerals and some of the things that you know about. You're really a very knowledgeable and experienced, I would say almost a medicine man, because you do have a lot of interest. And I think you mentioned maybe even previous experiences, with natives or with the previous genocide that has occurred. And now it's just not the natives that are being genocided, but humans in general, with this bioweapon that they were forcing and coercing people into. So before we get too far off track, your healing process for your broken neck has been such an interesting topic for me. I'm like, how do you do that? So I'm curious, like, what vertebrae was it? And you don't have to go into how it happened if you want, if there's too much, emotion there, but like, how did you heal yourself from that? Because people always get these impossible diagnoses by doctors, and just giving people like no hope and fear of death and terror and paralyzation. And then you must have internally just said, no, I'm not going to accept your diagnosis. I'm going to be free. And is that how it started? Did it start with your thought process, or did it start with some, conversation you had with somebody or higher source or inner, or how did the process of healing your broken neck, how did that all begin?
All right. Well, okay. So that's the great segue right there. Because this is the part that for those of you watching, these are the stories that actually led me to heal. So first off is life wants to heal. let's look at this for nature, for example. There's this bullshit propaganda that life is entropy and life's always, the organization that men set up is always torn down by nature. That's kind of like the implied brainwash. But the truth is, you plant a seed, like let's just say it's a basil plant, okay? You plant one seed, tiny little thing, it produces a giant plant, and then it makes 10,000 or a million seeds from one seed. So that's why I have a statement in my natural law group that nature takes chaos and organizes it. Now, I didn't know that when I broke my neck. So all I knew was that what caused the broken neck was arrogance. Okay, I'm driving on the freeway here north of town. I grew up in this area. I'm a very fortunate person to have grown up in Santa Cruz and in the South Bay area when it wasn't what it is now. I was terrified of Santa Cruz in the 60s because you hear about people get chopped up and you see their body parts in these vans in the Santa Cruz mountains. And so as a child, I was terrified of the hippies in Santa Cruz that they were being painted as by the media, of course. It was all a delusion. So I broke my neck because I was playing Dukes of Hazzard. Some of you have seen the TV program, the Dukes of Hazzard with Daisy and Bo and Luke Duke. And they got their car and they, it's part of chase scenes and driving fast and getting sideways. And so I was getting sideways, not wearing a seatbelt, young, arrogant man, 21, in a front wheel drive sedan, Audi 4000, should not have been getting sideways in a front wheel drive long vehicle, but I didn't know that at the time. So my friends are following me in their vehicle and I lose control of the vehicle. And that was the first moment that my healing started, was when I lost control of the car and I knew that there was nothing I could do. I did not believe in God, but I did not believe in God either. I was agnostic. I wasn't an atheist, but I didn't believe either. It's like, show me the freaking proof of this thing called God, right? So when the car had lost control, it was like my life started passing before my eyes, and this voice came in and it said, let go of the steering wheel, as I had lost control. And so I let go and let God. And that's where my healing started, because I lived because I let go of that steering wheel, I believe. And I hit an embankment off the freeway, car did an end over end, like, woo, like a stunt man, rolled a few times and then landed face up. The car was face up and the car was bent like a Coke can, and I won't go into, I had a lot of PTSD about it, but I'm happy to share the story. I wrote a 50-page story about this entire incident. So if anybody wants it, they can read the story. It goes into a lot of detail that I needed to process at the time. I wrote a journal about it, as I was healing. So jaws of life get me out. My friend, one of my best friends, was a paramedic who was following me, or his paramedic trained. So he knew, don't move. Because I tried to push myself up out of where I was in the crushed vehicle. And my whole left arm went numb. And then he knew something bad had happened with the numb arm. He's like, you broke something in your spine, dude. Don't move. And because of him, I lived. Because I didn't move, even though I was in terrible pain. And so they shipped me off to the hospital. And that was the next healing moment, was they put oxygen on me. And I went into a shamanic state for the next half hour. It seemed like it only took a minute with the oxygen on me. I can understand why people go to oxygen bars, you get high, but you rust. Oxygen causes rust and faster aging. So be careful, you oxygen bar people, because the price of oxygen is, it's not a friendly molecule. It's fire. If you don't control fire, you die.
Like oxidation.
So yeah, I got to Dominican, which is where Dominican now, as a 57-year-old, I tell people that's where people go to die. Because I've seen people go in there with common pneumonia and leave in a casket. A couple of people, wow. People go to Dominican to die. I didn't know that at the time. I had trust in them. I'm laying on the hospital bed, and they couldn't figure me out for a few hours. They didn't know what the hell I had, broken neck or whatnot. And then when they finally figured it out, the doctor comes in and he says, you shouldn't be alive, was the first thing he said to me. He goes, I don't know how you're alive, based on what I'm seeing in the x-rays and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that doesn't help me. Move along now, please. And then he's going through all of his prognosis and whatnot. Oh, you'll never surf again. And he's standing above me and I'm laying down. So he's in a superior position, right? And it's like his projection landed and part of me went, fuck off, and pushed his projection off of me. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew I got angry. And this voice in my head said, fuck off, you don't know my experience. And then I knew that that voice was me pushing off his projection of how he would have felt if he was in that position. It was his projection. And I said to myself, I didn't know what I was saying, but I said, I don't need to take on his reality. That's why people write theirs, they take on the doctor's projection because they're the expert, and they defer their own life to this expert when they're the expert of their own life. And then, oh, I'm going to die in 30 days of cancer. You know how many times I've seen that happen? The doctor says, you're going to die in 30 days of cancer. And if they have a weak will, they take on the projection, they die in exactly 30 days. You can go out there and see the studies for yourself. I don't need to point it out. Anybody can go see this. I don't spoon feed people either. You want information? We live in a lazy ass information age. Back in the day, if you wanted to get access to the Zen temple, you had to camp out for a month in the snow to prove your worthiness, to know the secrets of life.
Yeah.
So I don't spoon feed people. You go freaking get the difficulty of figuring it out for yourself. You know, that's how you heal, not being spoon fed your healing. That will never work. In the beginning, when you're vulnerable, yes, spoon feed, you nurture. There's a point you got to grab yourself by the cojones and take your healing for yourself. So that was the beginning of my healing. Was I'm not going to listen to anybody about my own healing process. So I went to their recommended physical therapy a few months later. I was in a halo brace for 3 months. And that was weird. You know, I didn't really go out in public a lot. Kind of weird walking around this fucking robot contraption, but my nickname became Robotron amongst my surfer friends. They come visit me and smoke pot and blow it on me because I was straight at the time. And that's when I started smoking pot, actually. Was my brother blew this hit on me when I got out of the hospital, and I was on Tylenol and codeine from the hospital. And I got home, and then I go, let me take a little puff of that and just try it. And then I laid down on the bed and the walls started breathing. And I felt so loved and cared for and numb, granted. It was, you know, it was Tylenol codeine. And I'm like, so I threw the bottle of Tylenol codeine away at that point. I said, oh, this is so good. It's scary. Mom, get it off my, bed. So I got rid of the medication, said, the weed actually was kind of cool. I'd rather just smoke weed and not take their fucking toxic meds. Excuse my language too. So fast forward, went back to school despite everyone's opposition. I surfed 2 weeks out of the halo brace, first of all, to disprove that idiot doctor. So 2 weeks out of the halo brace, I'm told, my family's told, never let him surf again. Don't let him surf. 2 weeks later, I say, I'm going to do this on my own, or you two friends can go with me, but I'm going to go surf. This is what I love to do. And I'd rather die doing that than die sitting in a chair wishing I could. Screw that. That's kind of how I always was. So I went out surfing and I was fine. Started surfing again. Went back to school a few weeks after that for the winter quarter at Cal Poly. And I noticed on the electives that went towards my bachelor's degree, there was a yoga class offered. I'm like, well, I get to get credit for something that I've heard can help. Sonia Glassmeyer, basic yoga. So as the story goes, I go into class and there are 60 women and me in this big auditorium at Cal Poly. And I'm like 21-year-old young man. I'm like, woohoo, struck the lottery.
Wow, that's awesome. So that was your first exposure to yoga.
Yeah, our first exposure, this blissful woman describing, the bliss of the universe, and 60 hot and sweaty women around me. And, as a young man, I'm not going to dumb it down. I love women, and I had all that extra energy as a young man. So I was so scared. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't date any of these women, didn't ask any of them out. I was terrified of all these beautiful goddesses. But they were, it was nice to look at them and enjoy their presence and their femininity. And it's part of my healing, right? Was to listen to this woman and be inspired. And that's what my give back is like, that's inspiration. Inspirational stories are fuel for us to grow from. So my story has at least 100 or 200 components of inspiration. And this is one of them. Wow, yoga. Because the physical therapy was a joke. The medical physical therapy, they weren't interested. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. But the yoga class gave me hope, And I've been doing yoga since. So that was 21, I'm 57. That's 36 years of yoga.
Would you say yoga was a key part of your healing of your neck and spine? Or what was the key part for the neck? Just your thoughts, your willpower, just kind of like not
I wasn't eating well at this point. I didn't really heal my broken neck until many years later. It took me a year to be able to surf well again because of balance. You know, it took me 6 years of surfing to get to that point. Then I broke my neck and I was out of the water for 3.5 and 4 months. So surfing is one of the most strenuous sports anyone can imagine, because it's stamina, strength, and balance. And if you don't have all three, oh, and you also have to have an empty mind. If you're thinking about what you're going to do on a wave as you're doing it, the wave's going to swallow you up. Because this apparatus can't keep up with reality. By the time it perceives reality, reality has moved on to the next moment. That's why when you're playing tennis, if you're thinking about how you're going to hit the ball, you ain't going to hit the ball well. There has to be a sort of a, if there's thoughts, they have to be seen through to be in the body, the presence and the breath. And so that was the first takeaway from yoga, was the breath is the most vital healing force. And my thoughts are out of control, like a fucking programmed robot. And that's what I noticed at age, I didn't really start meditating for a few years. And then I had my God experience 4 years later, age 25, because of yoga. So you could say the root of all my healing was yoga, because it tapped me into this large database of humanity and godlike beings that do exist. And they are helping us right now. But we have to ask for their help. That's part of divine law. We, each and every one of us, has to ask for divine help. Because right now we're not, as a world. We're resting in the belief, which I have a problem with that. You know, some people in my family use it. Oh, you have your beliefs and I have mine. No, I have data. I have written data and you have belief. Therefore, your beliefs don't mean crap. Data trumps belief. Data trumps faith. I know God directly, just like Carl Jung talked about. I don't need belief or faith in God because God is speaking through me right now. I know that for a fact. 100% of my being, I fall asleep like you and everybody else do. I'm not perfect, but one thing I do know after 36 years on this path is that I am not what I think I am. And I am not the concept that I think I am, and I'm not the concept that others think I am. Because this is all that's real, is me and you right now. So people watching the video, that'll be what's real for them, is the moment of you and I talking on the screen. They'll be watching it from their perspective as observer, but that's the only moment that's real, is this moment right now we're in. Everything else is illusion. And that's a very good place to go back to for healing, is when we don't know what to do with the specific. I was taught you go back to the general. Okay, I can't figure out this blood work, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's go back to the general. Is it hot or cold, wet and dry? Is it chronic or, acute? And you go back to what, so that's what I started to learn, David, was differential diagnosis. But the 25-year-old was a big time in my life. I had my grand awakening, my God experience of full and pure love that every spiritual teacher says happens. That the divine in me woke up through me. There is no enlightened ego. That doesn't exist. It's just a concept. The truth of what we are, what's always and already here, what I found out, it wakes up through us, and the ego, for the most part, remains unchanged because it's a tool of consciousness. So put food in this mouth as a tool of the ego. Figuring out the nature of the universe, not tool for ego. That's heart tool. Downstairs. That ain't head tool. Figure out the nature of the universe, the ego will never figure out. It's the wrong task for that tool. And that's what I've spent the last 36 years discerning through. So age 25, I'd had mononucleosis at age 20, was misdiagnosed twice. First strep, then tonsillitis, and then mono. I almost died. They had a tracheectomy age
So
20, a year before the broken neck.
That's amazing. Yeah, because these hospitals, I think hospital error is the third cause of death in America right now. You probably know more than I do, but like these hospitals are killing people. It's not just there in Santa Cruz, it's in Arizona and other places. I mean, it's everywhere because it's a death care system, and with the whole scamdemic, these hospitals were getting money for putting people on ventilators and giving them, diagnosing them with this virus allegedly. So it's a huge business. And so you healed yourself, you started to see what was going on in there, the misdiagnosis, and now you're one of the key healers that I know that helps people. And you said that you've helped, I think, over 100 people with,
Thousands.
thousands. Well, I'm talking about like the death diagnosis, right?
Oh,
Like
the death, yeah.
The
Yeah,
hospital says you're going to die because of this, you're going to die because of that. And then people are like, oh my gosh, you're wearing a white coat, so you must know the truth. And, like Western medicine has been dominated by Rockefeller and those types of petroleum type drugs and the
right.
medical schools. And it's amazing. And all of it's coming out, right? All of it's coming out. So now humanity is evolving, I think, to your type of work, where now you got to do the inner healing, emotional healing, and then herbs and tinctures. And so I guess that's my next question is there some place people can start if they're maybe just starting to realize or they want to do something about their health? I think yoga is very powerful. I'm starting to do more yoga as well, getting into my body and mind and spirit. But is there any, I don't know, detox regimens that are relatively simple and easy to begin for some of the new people out there who want to, really take their health seriously?
Okay. I think, David, I want to continue finishing because
Yes.
there was a timeline
Go ahead.
involved in what I was just saying, and what
Yeah.
you're saying is like 3 more steps ahead.
Okay.
Because the inspiring stories that we had, if we had only 5 minutes, I'd say, yeah, let's fast forward to that. But since we have time and there's a generous amount of, you can just get the story clipped in. So that was where misdiagnosed at 23 times. And let's be clear, the hospitals are a tool. There were good people embedded in a rotten system. The people at the top are generally, there's a few at the top, not everyone at the top, a few at the top are the rotten eggs, and they've ruined it for everyone else. And if you don't believe me, then you can go read a book called Confessions of a Medical Heretic. Let's see, what was that guy's name? Confessions of a Medical Heretic. And his quote in that book, this is an MD that dropped out age 55 because of the quote experimentation in hospitals going on with people. And he said, his quote, if modern medicine was to disappear off the face of the earth, 90% of all illness would disappear with it. Why would he say that? One of their own. So credibility is what I'm looking at, because I was a journalist in junior high and high school. And what's the first tenet of journalism? Have credible sources and be objective. So I got that. I'm willing to look at both sides. I don't get caught in the politics of it, because it's obvious that it's two wings on the same bird, a rotten, fucked up bird. So the hospital is just a tool that's being mismanaged, and there's a lot of good people embedded in it. When I broke my neck, I had 5 super caring nurses, and I believe that the average doctor cares. They're just brainwashed, that's all. So I wanted to start there and just say the system isn't evil and rotten. There's a few at the top that have set policy, and COVID was, I don't want to say the word, because saying the word gives it power. The bullshit that we just went through and are still in to some degree, it was based on money. Hospitals got on the average $33,000 if you die with COVID. It's a little word game, and that's the USA Incorporated part, what I teach in natural law. Just one word, you're a person. Now you're a corporate entity. Man or a woman, you're free. Sovereign, don't use the title. Don't use the sovereign title. They're considered a national threat now. A terrorist, the word, if you say you're a sovereign. So you can't say that. You say, I'm a man. You're David, a man on the land. It's that simple. That's it. Then you're a real person. But that's why they're getting rid of gender, because then you're a person, and then you're owned by the USA Corporation. So age 25, I got my second round of misdiagnosis. I had this big swelling on my cheek. Turned out it was mumps, but I was diagnosed with strep and then tonsillitis again, the same 2 freaking things. I was in college getting my second bachelor's degree in nutrition. I'd already gotten my first bachelor's degree in business. And there was another Craig 1.0 version where Craig was in college originally to get a degree in architecture. But by that point, by age 25, I was on Craig 3.0 or 4.0. There was the Craig 1.0 was long gone. So I'm like 3 months into this, whole summer was ruined by their misdiagnosis. We're sorry, we finally got the diagnosis correct. Now you have mumps, and we'll put you on your 3rd round of antibiotics. At that point, when I recovered, I stopped the antibiotics about after 3 or 4 days and just said, this is bullshit. I went and bought some echinacea. And, I didn't know much, but I knew enough to know I'm getting out of this system. And I vowed never, ever to take a pharmaceutical drug in any form ever again, even a painkiller. That was 32 years ago. I have never, ever been medically tested, jabbed, anything no over-the-counter painkillers, because I know the evil of the energy. And that's the place to start, is the segue to your question is, you got to go back to energy and frequency. And that's breath and thinking. We can always control our breath and our thinking. Most of the day, though, we're addicted to a dysfunctional form of thinking. At a baseline addiction, try and stop thinking. And then you too will see your addiction. The only way to stop thinking is being okay with thinking. It's a paradox. As soon as we resist, causes a contraction. Contraction causes more duality, which is more tension and polarity. And that's what this world is. It's a world of three-dimensional duality. It's not real. It's theater for the soul. I know that through and through now. It seems real, but that's the word, seems. It's like when you spray essential oils in the air. Oh, it seems like there's roses here. There ain't no roses. It's just a smell. It seems that way. I smell reality, you know? So right then and there, that's what I tell people. And I try to tell my clients too, is that if you're on more than one medication, no one can figure out the cocktail of what's happening in your body. Even one medication is dicey because there's so many mysterious interactions occurring on the cells and the tissues and the organs and frequencies and energies. And oh, by the way, our cells aren't reading chemistry. Let's start there too. That's an accepted premise. Our cells are reading frequency and energies. And then downstream from that is the hard fact of chemistry, which we don't want to throw out. But start with understanding of the way things are. Chemistry is a photograph of a chosen process occurring in you at a moment in time. Just like a photograph of David running a race is not, in fact, David running the race, is it? Would you say that a photograph of you halfway through the race is, in fact, you, David?
No, it's a moment in time. So yeah, so this is my vibration and frequency and energy. This is what's most important, it seems.
The process. So vitamins are processes. Vitamin A is a process. The B vitamins are processes. And then the chemistry is how they brainwashed people 100 years ago. They can make cheap ascorbic acid, which is like 1/10 of the C process. And they can make that from sugar, from GMO corn syrup from China. They can make ascorbic acid. The B vitamins, when you see USP, United States, what does USP mean? It means United States Pharmacopoeia. 99% of all B vitamins out there are made from coal mining waste through USP. And people buy their natural, rainbow light, whatever B vitamins, and think they're getting the real deal. They're getting a fucked up chemical substitute for the real nature's process. And synthetic B vitamins will fry your nerves. I've seen it happen on those 5-hour energy drinks and monster drinks with these huge doses of thiamine or B1. Okay, so that's a place to start, is just the suspicion, like I had, that this doesn't seem quite right. I should trust my inner gyroscope, that something feels meh. And to trust that that's the first place to start, is trust your own knowing. If you have no knowing, that's a good place to start too, is I don't know. I want to know, but I don't know. That's a great place to start. We talk about that in natural law. But I know everything, and I know what's going on, and the science is settled. Get the fuck away from me. When I hear the science is settled, I know we've got propaganda, charms, and brainwash going on. The science is never settled.
Science is settled. Oh,
the fuck
my
is that?
gosh, that is
I just tear these people apart. You can come at me. Hey, anybody out there, come and interview me. And I'll, if you say the science is settled, I'll destroy you on tape too, because it's not the way it is. Science is the ongoing investigation, because we're never there.
Right.
We're so freaking arrogant. That was one of my teachers said in Oriental medicine. He said, I'll sum up Western medicine in one word. And this guy was a master, he had shit mastered. So we're all like, what's he going to say? Arrogance. 1996, that's what he said. Western medicine is defined by arrogance. We know 1% of what's going on in the body at most.
Right.
At most. And so I tell people, if you're not willing to start with a question mark, get away from me. It's a question mark, and that's the simple place to start. Right. The humility that, So my process led to, 21 was yoga. And then I started going, gee, Jolly Ranchers and Cheetos and Ding Dongs aren't going to heal a broken neck, I don't think. And I always was curious as a teenager, like, why is it when I eat something, I feel rotten sometimes, and I eat other things and I feel good? And there must be a correlation between what I eat and how I feel. But medically, At the time, their statement was that diet has nothing to do with your health. That was an official AMA position. It still is, technically. Diet has nothing to do with your health. If that's not fucking brainwash and outright lie, I don't know what is. I will destroy anyone that tries to back that statement up.
Right. And
because I'm here to give you an experience. That's my practice slogan. I'm here to give you an experience you can't deny. Because at best, words are pointers to reality. At worst, words are manipulative tools. So don't worship the false idols in the Bible. The words and the symbols and the logos aren't reality. Thou shalt not worship false idols. That's a great pointer. I'm not a Christian. I'm not an anything. I'm not identified as anything. I'm here with David on camera right now.
Right, just the man.
But we use the Bible, we use the Bhagavad Gita, we use the Buddhist writings by these people that left us breadcrumbs to guide our path back to the moment. Because that's all it is. There's no destination we finally get to in Tibet, you know? What a bunch of bullshit. We always arrive back in the moment. Everyone, because I made enlightenment a scientific study from age 23 up to about 35, 37, 38, 39 I studied thousands of stories of people that became enlightened. I tried to make a science project out of it, but you know, it wasn't until I let go of the science project that I found out what it was. So the first part is I tell people the simple place to start is like, get off the meds if you can, because the meds are palliative. They are not healing. There are some drugs that can help heal, yes. And we want to examine those and use those cautiously, because what's the first tenet of the old medical model? First, do no harm.
Right.
Well, in the co-blab bullshit situation, it was first do harm and prove me wrong. Gee, we're going to put out a messenger RNA injection without 10 years of study and make the population the guinea pigs, and nobody thought that was weird. When it rolled out with me, it was like, because 15 years ago, my advanced teachers told me you can never have a vaccine for a cold and a flu. Never will you be able to do that. Never. And then I saw this come out and I'm like, oh, they've just defied the very premise of medicine. You cannot vaccinate for a cold or a flu. Because by the time you make the vaccine for a virus, it's already moved on to the next thing in a microsecond. It's already adapted. That's why the boosters are necessary, because they're trying to trick people into thinking, oh, this one's got it. No, by the time they make the booster, the bugs have already adapted to it. So if you're on a medication, get yourself full disclosure on what pathways the medication's causing in you and the side effects, because then you'll see the list of symptoms that you have and you'll go, fuck, it's from the medications. Suspect your medication as your first priority to look at when you have symptoms. 9 times out of 10, 2 times out of 3, usually people that haven't looked, they see like, oh man, look at that. Insomnia is a side effect of my anti-anxiety medication or whatever, you know. And they're not told the disclosure from the medical professional, the black box warnings, because these people, they might be good people, but they're lazy. You know, a lot of them are just lazy and they want to keep getting cha-ching, you know, like, because the pharmaceutical rep comes in, and I've talked to pharmaceutical reps and they give them a nice kickback. Oh, I'll take you out to dinner. They say it's illegal. They still do it.
Right.
Oh, I'll take you out to dinner.
And the doctors don't get any nutrition classes. We never got nutrition classes for, you know, K-12 in college.
Nope.
And it's by design. And
That's
so they would keep them in the dark, knowing that our body needs vitamins and minerals and hormones and all these things that source or creator put inside of us.
Yep.
And so, yeah, these pharmaceutical companies are, you know, selling products. And that's what's so interesting when you look at the hospitals, is that we're not patients at a hospital, we're customers. This is a money-making racket. And is it true? This little side note, I heard in the Asian or Chinese healing that the families would pay like a medicine man, kind of like a monthly stipend to keep them healthy, and when they got sick, they would stop paying them. Kind of like an opposite model of like prevention is better versus here prevention, they can't make any money off it. So, you know, everything's a catastrophic illness, and, you know, cancer and heart disease and all these things are through the roof. But you're mentioning something earlier about um, like labels and how they don't put stuff on labels. You want to mention a little bit about that so people know that the system is designed to keep you on the drugs, as you said, and not heal you. I mean, it's such a big rabbit hole. That's what I was trying to get into. How can people start taking their health back with simple hydration or vitamins or herbs or something like that, because it is such an overwhelming thing to, like, go to the doctors or the medicine aisle at the drugstore and be like, whoa, look at all this stuff. I don't even know what I'm doing. But
Right.
even, just starting with vitamin D from the sun, seems to be like a good start, or earthing, putting your feet directly on the soil, touching these trees. I saw a documentary called Heal for Free, and that's what they were doing. I was like, wow, I mean, this is so basic and I didn't even know about it. So some of these, like, obvious things that you might think maybe be new revelations for some of the listeners out there.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff I'd want to respond to on that. But first off, I'll just say I have a gigantic YouTube channel, 14 years on YouTube. Today was my anniversary, the YouTube people said. So I have literally hundreds of videos. I have an earth grounding one, and I based my practice on what's free and available to any one person with no equipment. I base my assessment techniques on the same thing. I have the skills of an acupuncturist, so I can take your pulses, take a photograph of your tongue. I do iridology and sclerology. So the first step is to make sure that you have doubt, is to say, okay, I have doubt. And then here's the basic, what I call the Craigie short list. Start with water, but also the quality of your water. The top-notch water is raw spring water right out of the earth. You can filter it a little bit to filter out the dirt, but that is what keeps your immune system in order, because there's natural little bacterias and funguses and myceliums in the water that falls from the sky, filters through the ground, and then comes back out through the ground. And that's what the immune system needs, is a slight challenge, regularly. And what do? They sterilize people. And then there was something called the hygiene hypothesis in the 90s. And that is where you start seeing autoimmune. And the more sterilized a child is, the more autoimmune conditions they have. This was talked about in the 90s quite regularly. And then autoimmune became this big bullshit mystery. But autoimmunity is not a mystery to me. One of the aspects is sterilization. The other one is too much cooked food. So the place to start is, more water. And you can even pray over your water. That's free. You can say, I bless you, water, and water will respond as a carrier of information and energy. Next would be get rid of the inflammatories. And so the simple is coffee, alcohol, white sugar, and cigarettes. Get them out. If you're serious about healing, you got to get them out. All of it. Green tea, black tea, yerba mate, there's good evidence that might help a cancerous condition. Chocolate is a top 10 allergen. I'm sorry, folks, but there are some people that metabolize chocolate okay, others that it's a dreadful nightmare. And if I do too much chocolate, too often, I get a migraine that'll take me down for 2 days. I'm one of those people that's very suspicious of chocolate. So get rid of your inflammatories. And the next one is make sure you're sleeping. Sleep and rest. This balance of activity and rest has to be in order. One tears the body down, activity, and one builds the body up. And you can't take a pill when you're not sleeping to regenerate what was lost by the not sleep. So that's the next one, is make sure you're sleeping well. And generally a good thing to do is, if you're not sleeping well, is start fasting. Stop eating at 3, 4, or 5 and let yourself go to bed hungry. Don't eat before bed unless your blood sugar is really off, because then that food's rotting in your gut all night. That's not what the divine wants. The divine wants us to be in divine consciousness, and we're sleeping with our belly empty. If we have food in our belly, one man that knows the Steiner stuff through anthroposophy says, then we're in earth consciousness when we're digesting while we're sleeping, and we're in astral consciousness if we're sleeping while our belly's empty. I have a definite resonance with that. Next would be more veggies. Just think, more veggies than I'm eating. Add a new veggie every week. That's easy. Anything, And by the way, green beans, potatoes, and corn are not veggies, folks. So get over it. They're starchy foods that happen to be in the vegetable category, but they're not veggies. Then the next one is let's see, there was one other one I had for this woman that lost 55 pounds in 2 or 3 months. She was morbidly obese. I just told her the simple Craigie formula. And then she did her work around all this. And then she lost like 55 pounds in 2 or 3 months. And she was like, was it really that simple? Oh yeah, more water, more veggies. Oh yeah, less wheat. Leave wheat out. So less wheat, less prepared, ground, floured, packaged foods. So if you follow, go back to the earth, get more raw. I'm not a raw foodist, but it's very clear that if you don't eat at least 51% raw, you will be in an elevated white blood cell count after you eat. Lots of data on that. So that's kind of the simple, David, is more veggies, less of the high carbohydrate stuff. Get your carbohydrate to protein ratios fixed, which means less carbohydrates and more protein in general. Get a little more fat than you are. And if you're really, really messed up with cancer, you cannot fry anything. You have to have raw fat only. Because your cells of your body, the brain of all those cells is in the membrane. It's not in the DNA. And the cell membrane is made of fat, cholesterol, and protein. So if you're on a low fat diet, a vegan diet, low protein diet, and low cholesterol diet, you're at risk of making unhealthy, stupid cells. And then when you have rancid oils like flour products, like wheat flour ground into a flour, you've got a wheat to make that into something. You get your wheat berry, and you grind it into a flour. Guess how old most wheat flours are in the health food stores, in the bulk bins? 4 to 6 months. That's my survey. When it's a week before the germ oils, like the wheat germ oil, is rancid. And when you have a rancid polyunsaturated oil, go look up, I'm not going to spoon feed you, go look up what linseed oil is in the hardware store. Linseed. Linseed oil was once flax oil. It's rancid flax oil, and you put it on your furniture like a solvent, a varnish.
People are eating this.
People are eating these rancid oils, and they're causing inflammation that they don't know why, but it's because they're eating too many polyunsaturated damaged oils, which look like evil threats to the immune system. And then our cells get made out of it, and they're like plastic, folks. Oil and plastic are on the same spectrum. Refined sugar and refined oils are hydrocarbons made of the same thing petroleum is: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's why my business is called Health Alchemy, because you got to break everything back down to the primal elements, the periodic table. Most of life is made of 5 elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen. The chosen ones, one teacher puts it, CHSON. You can remember it that way. And it's just Lego building blocks put in different configurations. So plastic, refined sugar, and refined oils and petroleum share that same. They have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Very toxic to the body. So you got to leave that stuff out, because you're making the intelligence of your cells from plastic. Then you have stupid cells, and the invaders, because our cells aren't reading chemistry. There's no CD4 spike protein receptor on the fucking cell. It's energy and frequency. And we've agreed upon this stupid premise that it's all chemistry. The tree outside doesn't give a fuck about chemistry. The bee outside doesn't give a fuck about chemistry. When we're in our daily life, chemistry is not important. It's a useful tool to see a snapshot of a red blood cell count at a moment in time for a person. That's it. Then we interpret and infer, and that's what the problem is. We've interpreted and over-inferred from dead data. We're studying death. That's what medicine does. They study cadavers, they study death. I've spent the last 36 years studying life and who's getting results. And I'm telling you, this is my report card. This isn't faith and belief. This is my 36 years and 110,000 hours of experience fed back to you people. Because this is my give back time. I shirked responsibility as a young man. I shirked responsibility as long as I could. And I was told by my guides that when I got into my 50s, I was going to be giving back everything that was given to me. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving back what I was taught at severe risk of being ostracized, bullied, murdered, and institutionalized. Those of us speaking out are at a terrible risk. Terrible risk. I was targeted last week. I had a headache for 2 days, and they just beam stuff on me when I do posts. Whatever they are, it was like common feeling the last since 2010. I do a media post, and then if somebody upstairs doesn't like it, then I get beamed on and to pressure me to not do it. And like, fuck you, I'm gonna keep doing it. So that's another thing, people, that you can get yourself straight with is what is worth living for and what is worth dying for. Get solid in that. I know what's worth dying for, but I don't want to be a martyr. I know what's worth living for. That's the more important question.
Right.
And that's this.
Right.
It's what's worth living for.
And when you have some knowledge or some semblance of truth, it's like a moral obligation to get it out there, right? Like it's no longer like it would be nice to. It's like it's burning inside of us. We got to let people know you own your body. You're responsible for your health, and you can do whatever you want on the earth as long as you don't harm somebody. I'm glad you mentioned the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, because that got flipped on its head the last couple years and, even a few decades with the whole, vax agenda. So
well, they don't say it anymore. They stopped saying the Hippocratic Oath in medical school because they knew what was coming.
That's right. Yeah. Just like
because if
Google,
you give your word under divine law and you break it, that's the worst sin. Because sin means you miss the mark. That's all sin means. And there's no moral obligation, David. It's righteous use of proper use of energy. The person who's more aware in an argument, the person who's more aware in a tough situation is the one responsible for bringing the higher conclusion to that situation. And if I don't, then there's karma. And it's cause and effect. There's no morality with this whatsoever. It's just cause and effect. If you don't act on your responsibility when you're more awake than someone else, and you go back down into that quicksand with them, you're going to suffer more than the other person that's asleep at the wheel. It's not moral. It's your own well-being. I'm telling you, because I used to dive down in the La Brea tar pits of delusion with people so I could help them. And that's why the great masters, every one of them I've studied, they take a big, long look when they take on somebody. Because they don't want to take on their karma. Because most people throw their responsibilities onto me. Oh, I don't want to, my healing here. You take my healing over, Craig. It don't work that way. And those people I discard out of my practice. You're not willing to take responsibility for your own healing. I'm just a guide. I'm a road sign on your freeway of life saying, hey, over there, you're driving over here, but you said you wanted to go over there. So why don't you go over there? Because now you're driving over here and that's the wrong way. Like, so that's what Adyashanti told us. He said, don't worship me. I'm not a guru. Just pay attention to what I'm pointing towards, over there. Go examine that. Explore it for yourself. Don't worship me. And that's the modern day spiritual teacher is not going to take on all that, is going to say, here, I'm pointing at this phenomena, go investigate, and then we'll talk about it. We'll explore it together. That's why I'm leading 4 groups a week, no less. Because people have a venue, a place to explore this together. Because it's a process like you and I are going through right now.
Well, that's amazing. I have to mention that to the audience because you are a very powerful leader and a gatherer of men and women and of, knowledge, right? Because it's this compound effect of we're learning this week or learning this next week. And people got to really, I appreciate what you said. Like they try to give you their responsibility of their life or their health. And it's like, that's not what's going on. Is you're responsible for you. I'm responsible for me. We're all in this together. And it's a bunch of heavy lifting and a bunch of work. But that's what this journey seems to be about, So you bring in that kind of spiritual aspect, the energy aspect of it. Something that came up for me because I saw that you had like either did or do have like a Rife machine, like energy healing device, right? Is this something that you think is going to come back, or do you use it currently? Because I'm being more aware of energy, vibration, and like conscious healing and power of thoughts, these types of things. But is something that you think it was very helpful? Apparently Rife was ostracized. I don't know much about that, but I know that they didn't want natural healing happening, and those types of machines, or maybe it's Wilhelm Reich or these types of guys who actually have solutions that are like inexpensive or free, and they're like, no, get that out of here. We're going to sell you our drugs. So what's your take on either the Rife machine or energy healing in the future or currently? Where's this going?
Yeah, well, thanks, David. So for those of you watching this, there is a bunch of rabbit holes that are around this, and the American Medical Association has been sort of working on the psychology around real healing since at least 1850. So they got about 170 something years of propagandizing the population. So it goes pretty far back, David. And so I'll speak to first off is, yes, I have a Rife machine and I'm not using it currently because I need a bigger clinic to operate it in. And I chose to come back here after a couple of business decisions. So I have a Rife machine. And the reason I have a Rife machine is because I was dating a woman with Lyme. Lyme is not what you think it is, folks. You could come and talk to me about it. I have many Lyme cures. One Lyme cure, by the way, the simple for this man was he was ejaculating too much and lowering his life force or chi, and then the Lyme symptoms would flare up. And him and his girlfriend, he was a young, attractive man, young, attractive woman. And that's the first question I asked him. I looked at their intake, was like, you guys look like you're a happy sexual couple. They have that glow about them. You have good sex, you kind of glow. And I feel that stuff. So I'm like, so my first question was, how often are you ejaculating? And they look at each other and then they look at me and there was this knowing, and he goes, they knew immediately. They knew immediately that when he ejaculates too much, the joint pain follows. And so he's cured himself of Lyme as long as he doesn't ejaculate too much. That's his cure. Just take control of your energy and don't let your energy body diminish because it takes a lot of life force to make ejaculate. And so I'm one of the men that teaches other men how to choose between orgasm and ejaculation. That should be a choice. Most men have no idea it's a choice. Men could be multi-orgasmic with understanding how the equipment works. Most men, 99.9%, they have no idea how the equipment works. They're just ejaculating up a storm. They're lowering their life force. So that's one really easy one, right? Control yourself a little bit. You can still masturbate, just don't blow the load, It's literally that simple. So that's one Lyme cure. So back to the topic then is so she had this Lyme disease, and she said as long as she used the Rife machine, she felt okay. Was it placebo? I don't know. But the results, that's what I spent my career studying, is who is getting results and why. That should be the premise of every medical professional. Who's getting results and why? Fuck your double-blind 10 mice studies. Fuck your mice studies. Mice aren't human, So they're basing like iodine therapy and even a couple of the new more they're just basing it on these animal studies, which may or may not translate to a human, of course. So I have a hydrogen aqua cure machine by George Wiseman, an AC 150 or whatever. And that spits out a Brown's gas, a hydrogen gas, a plasma form of water he calls HHO. And it's specific for hydrating the cells with hydrogen, free hydrogen. And the water becomes electrically expanded. He quotes 1,000 times larger than the original water molecule. So there's a lot of chi in that. And here's a jar of it right here. So I use that regularly. I do it morning and night. I drink my water out of it. I put a cannula, so I put it up my nose. I have a PEMF mat, a pulsed electromagnetic field mat that I sleep on. That was about $600 from Miramate. And that one is a Schumann resonance, basically. It's a long, slow, pulsed electromagnetic field that puts your cells back in the proper frequency for healing. Lots of anecdotal evidence coming in on those. Parkinson's, sleep problems. That's why I got it. I started reading testimonials, hundreds of them. I'm like, this is worth having. And then I have a skin cancer gun. It's another form of radiation that kills skin cancer. You put it right next to the skin cancer. I got that piece of equipment. It's got, so Rife was taken down. The medical people were originally interested in his work. They took him down. You mentioned the orgonite guy.
Right.
Yeah, Reich. They took him down because he was healing people in these cancer orgone chambers that could be made from earth and metal and natural things very cheaply. Oh, no, we can't have that. So he died mysteriously in prison. I was talking to somebody about that. There's Emanuel Revici, by the way, Revici. Nobody knows about this dude, but he was doing all kinds of good work in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Emanuel Revici. Gershon, cancer therapy. Harry Hoxsey was taken down. Renee Cossier of the ESSIAC formula, her clinic was burned and taken down. And what do you see going on now? Anyone speaking the truth, their clinics are burned or taken down, or they're murdered or put in jail to silence them, including the January 6th horse shit. That is the biggest piece of political bullshit. I saw the videos of the Antifa people before they were taken down, and the Trump supporters were all, boo, get out of here. And that was a Pelosi and a Democrat planned agenda to demonize the emerging revolution. But it was not anything close to 9/11. And anybody that says so is full of shit, because they opened the doors for the crowd of Antifa to come right in to the Capitol building. I saw it myself. There was no riot. It was a generated event to demonize people that want, what the fuck is wrong with making America great again? I really don't see what's wrong with that. Well, how could you argue with that? Yeah, there's a bunch of Trump weirdos out there. Granted, sure. There's a bunch of extremists, yeah, sure. Great. And Trump himself has been caught in a lot of bullshit. So two wings, same bird, folks. The system's rotten.
Right.
I'm not a Trump believer. I'm not a Biden believer. I'm a general since age 15. This government has got to go because it's not a government, it's a corporation. That's the lie you're not being told. The United States of America is a corporation owned by the Vatican and London, and we don't know because we're being lied to. Oh, and by the way, DC is foreign soil. It's not even really American soil. It's a foreign-owned entity. So the machines, yes, they're, David, I'm getting good results. I just need a bigger venue. And what's the next thing? Okay. The reason why I'm teaching, David, is people can understand the process by which nature works. So that statement I made at the beginning, that life wants to heal. So life has this force of healing and making the divine matrix in each of us, or plants. And it just needs, so it's like a blueprint, right? You have a blueprint called David Rodriguez. Make eyeball cells for David, make nose hairs for David Rodriguez, make lip cells, make gut cells, make hair cells, right? But there's a blueprint for that called your morphogenic field. MORPH, morpho, OGENIC, morphogenic field. And that was originally talked about in the Celestine Prophecy, which people my age remember that book. James something was his name, the Celestine Prophecy. And he talked about the morphogenic field in that book. So if you want to read the Celestine Prophecy, don't watch the movie. I didn't like the movie. It's always undersold. The book is excellent. Standard Process, the company I use, they make protomorphogens since 1935. Well, why would this man make something that's a blueprint for the cells? Because he was getting results. That's why. 1935. That's why I'm using this company. That's 85, 87 years of results. Why wouldn't I use them? Holy shit, So the morphogenic field is a blueprint for David, but you got to have the contractor and the workers with the building blocks to build the new self, right? And that's where we've been sidetracked. Oh, you don't need to eat raw. You don't need to eat good fats. You need to eat a high carb, low fat, low protein diet. That has inflammation written all over it and new cell synthesis, not good. So each of us has a project, which someone like me can help with, is what's the amount of protein, carbs, and fat? What's the amount of vegetables? What's the amount of fruit? How do I change with the seasons? There's a bunch of stuff going on here that I teach, and a lot of it's free on YouTube. So there is simple and easy. So it's understanding what causes the body to grow. And we call that anabolism. Anabolic means to grow, and catabolic means to tear down. And that's the yin and the yang right there. The polar opposite forces. There's cells in the body, osteoblasts, that's making bone cells 24/7. And then there's cells called osteoclasts that are tearing down bone cells 24/7. Well, that's interesting. So there's a regulating part of the body which says, okay, building bone cells build more, you have a broken bone, versus tearing down, right? And this man at Standard Process discovered all this in the 30s and the 40s, and he wrote a book called Protomorphology. So how does the body know when to stop growing you? Like, David, how does the body know when to stop growing, David, when you're a teenager? Your long bones and your skull. How does it know?
Blueprint, I have no idea. Source knows. I don't know.
It's called the natural tissue antibody. It's a catabolic force in the body that says stop growing. And Royal Lee of Standard Process defined it as early as 80 years ago. Now, natural tissue antibodies that have gone out of control, we call that autoimmune now. It's a catabolic force, and the immune system is pissed off because they're seeing DNA of your own cells cruising around the body. And that's one of the jobs of the immune system, is to cruise around for your own lysed, L-Y-S-E-D, your own lysed DNA from damaged cells. So, you know, it's like understanding the force of building up and tearing down, and inflammation is a tearing down force. Stimulants are a tearing down force. Prednisone and cortisone are tearing down forces. So yeah, take your pain reliever, take your stimulant, but don't whine about the fact you're aging faster. That's not self-responsive. I mean, I got, this is a coffee with a bunch of herbs in it right here. I'm not whining about my consequences of drinking that, because I know the consequences of drinking that. So the number one herb that healed my system was comfrey, C-O-M-F-R-E-Y. Comfrey has growth factors in it. Your urine has growth factors in it. Fresh urine does. And guess what? The active ingredient in comfrey, allantoin, A-L-L-A-N-T-O-I-N, is directly similar to urea in urine.
Wow. And how do you take comfrey? Do you like make a tea or put it on food or like just eat it?
We're treading on very dangerous waters here, because there was an FDA study with 10 rats in the 60s that says comfrey causes cancer because of a pyridinosyl alkaloid. And I was warned about this when I was training 30 years ago by my teachers. So I took comfrey every day for 5 years to fuck the FDA, to see for myself. And guess what happened? They said I was going to die of liver cancer, but guess what happened actually?
What?
My leaky gut healed, my allergies went away, and I gained 10 pounds, and my penis grew an inch. What man doesn't want that?
It's the super herb. Comfrey is the super herb.
Who wouldn't want that, you know? And it was basically, if you grow a plant, it's free. Now, there's a qualifier. In Chinese medicine, you never feed a tonic to an illness, because it's growth factor. And if you have a cancer cell that wants that growth factor, the cancer will eat the comfrey and grow. So you have to have this in place before you can use a strong tonic like comfrey. So I'll give you one example. I did a blog about comfrey years ago on my blogger site, which is now, you know, kind of defunct now, but it was called Comfrey, Honest Outlaw. I mean, Honest Healer or Outlaw. And this woman from Australia who's an herbalist loved my article. She emailed me and said, hey, I love what you said, because here's my experience. I had a cat that got bone cancer. And one of the nicknames for comfrey is knit bone. The Indians used to call it knit bone. And so she said, well, maybe I'll try the cancer causing herb. Let's try it with cancer with the cat. You know, the cat's going to die anyway. So let's see. Healed the cat's bone cancer. And then guess what? The next year she got bone cancer. And then she took it and it healed her bone cancer.
Wow.
And I have testimonial after testimonial of stuff like this, and my own personal experience of taking it daily for 4 years. You know, it's kind of stuff you got to do. You got to find out for yourself. And I was willing to die to find out. You know, it's like if you're in a poker game with God, you know you're in the game when you're the bet. Your very life is the stakes. That's how I live my life. If I'm not up on the table with God, placing myself as the bet, I'm not in a good place.
Yeah, that's a great point. Of being in the game of life, being in the arena, being on the court versus being a spectator. And I think this is kind of the call for strong men and women now in this moment to get into the game, whatever it is. You know, Craig's a courageous man for doing the work. And, you know, I've been speaking truth for a while. There's a lot of courageous people out there, but we need more people to come out and say the emperor has no clothes. They're dealing with harming children and old people and, you know, women and children and reproductive systems. Like, this is unacceptable. So there's solutions out there. Craig's one of the guys to help you. And so he has this, you know, health alchemy, and it's amazing that he's been able to help people. Like you said, thousands of people, thousands of clients, and this type of conversation, this type of consultation And you can see it's a general now, but when he works with you, it's very specific. So as we're kind of wrapping up for this session, one of the questions I have is about coffee enemas.
Oh,
And
yeah,
because
yeah.
I learned about it because, you know, I didn't come from a medical family, mainstream. And it's like, well, I learned about the Gerson therapy, and the quick background, my understanding is this guy, he was helping cure cancer. And he had to, I think, move his practice to Mexico, like a lot of, you know, healers.
Can I
But
pause that
one
for a
of the,
second just to
go
clarify?
ahead. Mhm.
So Gershon was poisoned with arsenic early on when he was getting results, and he cured himself. And then he was poisoned again and he died, and his daughter took the work to Tijuana. So that's the clarification. He
Okay.
was
Yeah.
dead, I think, before they went to Tijuana. And they went to Tijuana because they had killed the father, Max, and the daughter, I forgot her name, but they're still doing really good work down there, apparently.
Right. Yes. So this, and I think it was in a film or a promo video or something I saw or read, and they talked about the coffee enema, and then you have very high results, or, you know, positive feedback. And I'm like, what the heck is it? So I looked into it. I'm like, oh man, that's a little bit advanced. But what is that about? Because it's like, it makes you feel good, or you do it frequently. And Gerson was, you know, recommending it for, you know, curing these types of illnesses. So what is that? And I know that's a little bit, you know, out in left field, but it's an interest point for me, because I've heard other people talk about it too. I'm like, well, what is it and how does it work? Or I don't know, whatever the introduction to coffee enemas are, I'm sure the audience would be curious to learn as well.
How much time I got, do you think?
You know, a few minutes. I don't know. We're almost finished up, 5-10 minutes.
Okay, what I would generally do is I would do a screen share and do a whiteboard to demonstrate my point, but I can just stand up and show you my point. So one of the greatest items of stagnation in the body, where a lot of congestion starts, is in what's called the hepatic portal veins, Portal, portal. And so what those are is those are all the veins from the intestines, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine. They all go up over here to the liver. So there's thousands of these blood vessels, and they get full of silt. They get full of sludge, and the coffee breaks that down. So you've got this, because when you eat food, the body takes the food and sends it over to the liver to be processed through the portal veins before it goes into general circulation. The only exception to that is fat, which gets processed through the lymphatic system. So if you have lymphatic congestion and big lymph nodes, you're not going to process fat well. And that's a little hidden secret, is the lymphatic system, the gallbladder, and fat digestion are all tied together. So the coffee enema, coffee is a solvent. Try it for yourself. Make a strong cup of coffee, put it in your toilet before bed, and scrub it in the morning, and your toilet will be bright white. Just like Coke. They used to do it with Coke because of the phosphoric acid in Coke. So it's a solvent, and it dissolves the sludge, but it also dilates, because caffeine dilates those portal veins and causes a little bit of this, which shakes more of the sludge off. So there's a little more to it than that, but basically the coffee, the rhetoric around it is that it speeds up liver detox by 700%. You'll see on the web. And I haven't found that mechanism. Some people say the palmitic acid in the coffee. There's so many compounds in coffee, though. I don't know. I see it as personal experience. I'll go back to that. People that use coffee enemas do better with cancer in general. Generally, for me, if I have pain, a headache, or suicidal depression, the coffee enema will remove 99% of it. I'm not joking. So they used to administer coffee enemas in hospitals. The nurses used to do it for chronic pain, for pain. I know that because I heard it with my own ears from nurses I've worked with over the last 35 years. Oh, you're doing those? Oh, we used to do this in the hospital all the time. I'm like, why aren't we still doing it? Right. It works. Oh, we can't have that. We have to bill for $33,000 for dying with COVID when the coffee enema would have cured them. Because guess what coffee enemas are? Liver dialysis. I kept a liver failure patient alive for months doing coffee enemas, and then the family couldn't pay for us anymore. And he died at Dominican 3 days later because they're fools and they didn't know how to deal with him. And so the coffee enema was keeping the waste going in and out faster, but then he was consumed by his own waste in the end. So I would say you don't want to start with a coffee enema. You want to start with a quart of salt water. For a beginner, you get a quart, you get it in, get it out and see how you do, and then you go from there. You don't add in coffee until you're confident you can get a good salt water in you that's going to be less reactive than the coffee, which could cause spasms, cramps, pain, too much detox too fast. So the starting point is like, if you're interested in trying, I have a coffee enema video. I got lots of materials on it, but step one is a quart of salt water, which is a tablespoon of Celtic salt. Don't use any other salt, folks. The pink salts are fucked up. I don't use them anymore because there's no proof they're not contaminated. If you want to read about it, it's Water and Salt by, there's an author in Europe. It might be Peter Ferrer. I forgot his name, but Water and Salt talks about the original pink salt, and not the, if you're buying it at Costco and Trader Joe's, you got a contaminated salt. So a tablespoon of salt per quart of water is an isotonic solution for the colon. And if I don't do that amount of salt in my enemas, I get cramps, spasms, or whatnot. But I put that amount of salt in my fluid stream going into my colon, and it's like butter going in. It's so smooth. It feels so soothing. But without those minerals, then you're robbing minerals from the colon wall to buffer that fluid because it's not as salty as your blood. So that's the correct isotonic amount, 2 or 3 teaspoons of salt. I use a whole tablespoon myself because that's what seems to work for me. And the value of the coffee enema cannot be underestimated, and it's not for everyone. I've had a number of people where it made it worse, maybe 1 in 30, 1 in 20, 1 in 30. And then there's a crowd of people where they didn't really feel much of anything, but they weren't sincere enough to actually make the effort.
And do you feel it after the first try, or you got to just try it a few times?
I was laid waste for the first 3 or 4 or 5 times I did enemas. I was in bed for hours afterwards because I had so much waste in me. You have to remember, David, I had 10 allergy shots in each arm for 10 years. 10 allergy shots in each arm from age 5 to age 15. I don't know how I lived through all that. If you multiply, that's 50 weeks a year times 10 years times 10 shots. That's 500 shots times 10 years. That's about 50,000 shots. But no big deal, So my first set of enemas was like, my body was like, yippee, this stuff's finally out. And I had a healing crisis. And it wasn't until about my 15th coffee enema that I felt like I finally got it down. The spasms, the cramps, the discomfort. I just knew, just like the broken neck, I knew that there was going to be discomfort on the path of healing. And those of you out there that think you're going to have the blissful healing thing that's presented to you by the new age idiots, I'm sorry, it's not the way it works. You come to nirvana by way of samsara, is the Buddhist saying. You come to your peace by going right into your suffering and processing it, not bypassing it, not medicating it, not numbing it. Nope. And so I become an expert in people who are bypassing. They spot it. I'll directly tell them, you're bypassing. Is this really what you want to do? Yes. Okay, move on. The next person. I'm not going to help you. Right.
Right.
Because if you're in bypass, I can't be of help to you because you're still under the spell.
Right. And the bypass means they're avoiding what they need to take on, and you don't want to work with people like that.
Well, I went right into my suffering because I followed the major pointers of the masters, and people aren't studying masterfulness. They aren't studying what masters do and how they become female and male. And I don't know if there's any non-gender masters out there, but there are probably a few around the world, they're clear they're not a man or a woman, but they've mastered that. I'd like to talk to somebody like that who's an LGBT. They've mastered it without reactivity and propaganda, That'd be fucking cool. I'm a man and a woman. Let's talk. I'm interested in that shit,
Oh my, that's a big one, right?
Right. But I'm not going to be
man.
no PC thing. Like that guy who said that woman was offended by his anti-LGBT comment. And he said, good, get over it. I'm not going to take back what I said.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't either. You're offended? Great, be offended. I don't care. I mean, I care that you're hurt, but I'm not going to change my attitude because of pressure, and neither should any of us.
Right.
This is
this is the whole point of dialogue and conversation and debate, is we're allowed to have the most fiery, fierce debates and words. As long as we're not being violent or threatening violence, we can say and do whatever we want. And this is a really big point because they're censoring channels like yours and mine and many people out there because we're winning, because truth is getting out. The
That's right.
knowledge is becoming open, and even some person who is like just new in the last 18 months or 2 years to this whole system, they're like, wow, and they go quick. We know the people's names, we see their organization, and now they're gonna try to plow through us. And some people are gonna go get the chip and follow the agenda, and many people aren't, and I think they have a really big problem. So this is why the slogan here is to build a voluntary world. We want to interact on a voluntary, consensual basis.
Right.
And when we're feeling better, when we have good energy, good food, good knowledge, we can live longer. We can have kids. We can, take care of our grandparents and young people with strength and power. And instead of trying to monetize sickness, give them your herbs or give them your healings, and they can heal themselves, and then they can go out and live a great life and enjoy this thing, which is the human experience, which is beautiful. And now, like, people like you seeking enlightenment, pursuing it, and now we're like, yes, this is the path. This is a way to raise the frequency. And we're always a work in progress, but I'm starting to realize it's kind of like a spiritual experience with this body, and connected to source and divine, and everybody has different paths to it, but ultimately it seems like unconditional love, self responsibility, inner peace, self-knowledge, self-forgiveness, compassion, these types of invisible things are what makes, I think, the physical and the visible world enjoyable and pleasurable and fun. But trying to, like you said, the summation of Western medicine of being arrogance, I think that's true in the education system, in the media system, the political system. And, I don't even believe government's a legitimate organization because I didn't consent. And if we do have unalienable rights from source or creator, then it does require our consent, as the Declaration of Independence said. So humanity is evolving, and I think you're one of the visionaries on the earth, Craig. So thank you for being here. And is there any final words you want to share with the audience as we wrap up this first session? We cover a pretty broad range, but very important topics, and we can see you're very knowledgeable and experienced. But any closing statement for the people?
I just want to honor Harvey Wiley. We didn't get a chance to touch on him. He was the first head of the FDA. And people, here's how you know there's a problem: is white flour and white sugar. This man came onto the scene in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s because there was no labeling laws, and they were putting toxic poisons in the canned food and getting away with it from 1850 to 1900. So he established labeling law standards to hold these companies accountable, which is what we're having right now, right? So he was a visionary, and then he saw how badly white flour and white sugar was causing cancer. So he passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, which should have been all white flour and white sugar should have had a cancer-causing label in it as of 1906. I'm going to end there because this man took on the whole demon called USA and all of its sub-branches, and he knew what he was going into, and he went in anyways. And I want to honor this man as one of the greatest heroes of our time. Nice. Harvey Wiley, the last and only true head of the FDA that was for we the people. Everyone since has been a brainwashed puppet since 1910.
Yep. Yeah, it's a revolving door.
It's a revolving door for industry.
Yeah, industry, and then regulation, and same thing with financial services. It's a big racket. So
but I wanted to end on just honoring this man and his memory that I hold so dearly, because I post true heroes on my Facebook page, and he's one of them. True hero, Harvey Wiley. I want to end on this man. Is his soul has got to be happy there are people like us going, yep, we're gonna fix this.
Yep, that's a great point, Craig. And where can people find your website, or learn how to hire you, or read some of the stuff that you're doing? Is there a place they can find you?
Well, the central place is my website, healthalkemy.com, HEALTHALK is in kitten, EMY.com. I'm on, so from there you can get access to my TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever else is on there. Okay. So yeah, going to my website gets you all those links. So it's an easy one-stop shopping.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for what you're doing here on the earth, Craig, and appreciate you. You're a courageous man. You're a hero also. So, this is how it works. We have heroes, and then we become the hero. And everybody listening and watching, you are the hero of your own life. And if you haven't realized, you are the king and queen. You own your body. This is your property. This is your domain. and it's very precious and it's very sacred. So some of the work that you and other natural healers are doing, Craig, are precious and so priceless. You know, how valuable is it to feel healthy and energized? And so, you know, you're teaching a lot of people out there. So thank you for being a leader. And some of the people watching, you know, tune into some of the stuff he's got going on, and then start speaking out in your own communities as well. You know, gather the people, get some meetings together, start talking about this stuff. It's now open time, open season to talk about truth, to talk about doubting the science is settled and all this hypocrisy and basically anti-science. So this is what it is to be an educated individual. We ask questions, we pursue it, and if we find out we're wrong or mistaken, we change our opinion. And that's what being an educated person is in my mind. So I want to thank you for joining us on the Freedom Lovers Show. We are building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time, one conversation at a time, one interaction, and that's what we all did today. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bless you, David.